my name is Sam, and this is Sherlock. Thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification, and give the video a thumbs up. Now, this video is like a little late. I remember a couple months ago when the article of this came out, and I was so like heartwarmed to see the amount of backlash that this article got. I think I'm honestly just more like mind blown that like a known institution such as Forbes actually like what editorial processes this article got through. I just have so many questions about that. They did end up taking the article down, but damage done to their reputation, I guess. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, a couple months ago, an article was released on Forbes. I'm not sure if it was in the magazine or just online, but it was at least online, where Forbes published it, and it was literally looked like titled, "Libraries are replaceable by Amazon bookstores. And to save tax dollar monies, you should all support this." I feel like the more concerning part on top of all that was that the author was the head of some economics department. Like, it concerns me what the qualifications are. I mean, you can be like, oh, I don't like the policies of libraries, but literally any math person could look at the cost of libraries per tax person and be like, what is this human being talking about? And how is he the head of an economics department? But nonetheless, his argument was that he had to pay high tax dollars. I don't remember the amount it was, nor where he lived geographically. It was somewhere in the United States. And that he didn't feel like he felt he paid too much taxes, and that libraries were pointless. No one uses them anymore. I mean, I feel like my profession makes it so you know where I'm going to come at it. So instead of kind of like an ugly rant, because I feel like anyone who's going to watch this video is fully aware of how ridiculous that is, as well as the fact that libraries operate on such little funding. Like, it's pennies of your tax dollars at most. It depends geographically where you live. It depends on how your tax system is structured. I know, like, the Ferguson Library, I learned in the last year or so recently, is like they specifically, like, people in the community pay tax dollars. It literally goes to that. It's not like a government kind of fund. It's literally the tax dollars. Whereas like the places I work at are more funded like at a municipal level, and then there's provincial grants, and then there's like the towns or city it's in also can fund it as well. So it's really kind of a mixed bag, and each community can tax it in at whatever level they see fit. And on top of all that, I learned like a couple months, actually I think it was before this article came out, there has been in the last few years, libraries have been doing like cost return benefits of libraries. And it was something like for every like dollar or something like that the Toronto Public Library gets, it's like thousands and thousands of dollars in return to the community. And they did like the benefit or the value of the public library, and it was over like $1 billion in Toronto. So don't come at me that libraries don't do anything. If you don't use the library, that's on you. And I don't know why you wouldn't, because there's so much stuff that you can use for free and you're paying through your tax dollars. But as well as, it's kind of like a pay it forward sort of system that even if you don't use that service, you know, like I didn't necessarily use the public library when I was in college. I was using the school library if I did anything, and I just didn't have the time to pleasure read. So people who did, my tax dollars were being paid, but that person in the community that couldn't afford to do other things was now able to use the library when I didn't. So it's sort of a pay it forward. Maybe that's too much of like a liberal good person-y sort of thing, but there is that aspect of it too. And I think on top of that, I just want to make sure too of like, because I am someone who is now conscious of this, I'm originally from Southern Ontario. I'm used to having everything at my fingertips, but I don't live there anymore. I live very north, and it's truly amazing to like move to a community. Like, I live in a city and we have a lot of these amenities. We don't have an IKEA, unfortunately, but like there's a Starbucks on every corner, and there's Subways everywhere, and there's McDonald's everywhere, and there's gas stations everywhere, but you leave this city and there's nothing for hours on end in really any direction. Some small town may have like a small Subway, and that's it. Like, there's no bookstores, there's no Walmarts in most of these communities. They have to commute hours each way in order to come to Costco or Walmart to haul, once a month they do a big trip to haul back to their community because there's literally no stores there. So I feel like those communities especially are ones where like those tax dollars are so essential and such a key service the library is in that community, or like they're so small and kind of dying, some of them. Like, there's literally nothing else keeping people there if you don't give them a library. And let's be real, you're not closing that library in a community of 600 people and opening an Amazon Books, okay? Don't at me, even at a business perspective. You're not doing it. We don't even have chapters, proper chapters in our city of over 70,000 people here. We don't even have a proper chapters. You're not putting one of any other franchise in a community that already like is closing its library. I wanted to tell everyone about all the amazing services I'm hearing about libraries doing, so you can understand why Amazon Books cannot replace libraries, nor should they. They can be two separate entities. I also really, honest to God, wasn't really totally aware until I read that article that there were actual physical Amazon bookstores, because I've never seen one in my life. I've been to cities in Canada. I've lived in like capital cities in Canada, and I've never, ever seen or heard of one. So I'm not even sure the logistics of that. Maybe that was just a very US-centric thought that he had, but... So right off the bat, the access to free resources in general. There are libraries that have like government resources within them, so that when you go to the library to grab books and everything, like you have social services in like the Edmonton public libraries, and you have, even in Halifax actually, it was part of their marketing campaign when they opened their new branch, that the homeless are welcome there. And it's on top of all of the like resources that if you actually start calculating the cost of you getting to use Ancestry Library Edition that is free, you getting to borrow RB Digital magazines, you getting to listen to audiobooks on Hoopla, that stuff adds up so very quickly to thousands and thousands of dollars a person. So even if you are paying $20 in a membership fee a year max, you are still getting that money back time and time over. Now, it depends on each community, but check to see if your library has interlibrary loans. We are very blessed in Alberta. I could literally go to nearly every single library in the province and borrow a book with my library card, which is completely free in my city. I can also, if I'm just in my city and I want the book that is not available anywhere else other than the Edmonton Public Library, they will send it within like a week or two. It will get to me for completely free, and I can pick it up at my library. We also have this amazing program here that allows you to borrow from post-secondary institutions. So like if you're doing like distance learning, or if you're someone that has like really obscure academic interests and you're not in school anymore, databases like that and encyclopedias, physical ones, are so insanely, like, offensively expensive, especially the online databases. You will never as a human being be able to afford that, especially on like if it's like a leisure thing. Whereas I can literally just request it through my library system for free and pick it up within like a week or two from my library. Doesn't matter the topic. Like, I've literally never looked a book up and not found it in our province. There's like over 300 library branches, and like all of them work within each other. It's insane. So check to see if your province or state has anything like that, or even if you're a part of a bigger city, you can have it. Like, you know, if you're like places like Toronto. Toronto has almost like 100 library branches. They're not going to carry every single book in every single branch. But if you say, you know, this is my branch here, they'll ship it over. So in 2 days, you'll get a notification saying, hey, come pick up your book at the library if you don't have the time or the means to travel. Sometimes it's in big cities like Toronto. Sometimes it's like more like regional things, like, you know, Halifax is the regional municipal. So there's like Cole Harbour and all these kind of smaller communities around it that are part of the Halifax region, that they all kind of work together. So make sure to ask your library to see if they offer interlibrary loans, because I hear so many people say things like, my library sucks, they don't carry any books. I'm like, well, if you're a YA reader and you live in a predominantly senior age community, they demographically may not, but did you see if you could request it from the library a couple like blocks away? Libraries are also doing like some really cool different like lending. So there's things like DVDs, like they're still insanely popular, especially in the northern communities here where most people don't have internet access. Good internet access or internet is just insanely expensive. So there are libraries that I know that like they literally don't even have shelving in their library for DVDs because they cannot keep them in stock. As soon as someone scans them and there's 10 holds on it, like, and they have hundreds of DVDs in their collection. Libraries are also doing video game lending programs. It depends on where you're going. This is still kind of a new thing, and I think in a lot of communities, or it's developing. But like for bigger consoles like Xbox and PS4, they have libraries that you can like go in and borrow Assassin's Creed, kind of like a Blockbuster thing. And some, I've even seen some, very few because of the cost, I've seen some libraries like research and reports that they were doing video game console lending. So if you're not able to, afford your own game console, which is understandable because they can be quite expensive, then you can borrow the console from the library. Like they'll either let you leave with it, you kind of normally have to pay a deposit or something, or they'll allow you to rent it and like play it in the library. Quite a few of my libraries are also doing cake pan lending programs, which I thought was kind of like, wow, I'd never heard of that. But that is apparently a very common thing. So like, instead of having to go to Bulk Barn and spend like $20 to get like an Elsa from Frozen cake pan that you're going to use once in your life for your kid's birthday, you can go to the library and borrow the cake pan, bake in it, and then return the cake pan. Like, there's also some libraries that I know that are doing like seed exchange programs, especially like when springtime rolls around. So like, you come in, you're like, I have all these strawberry seeds that I don't need, but I'm looking for pumpkin seeds. And they'll like, you can trade them. There's also some libraries, especially the bigger city libraries, doing musical instrument lending program. I think from the sounds of it, a lot of those have been like through sponsorship deals with places like Sun Life Financial and that sort of stuff. But they're allowing people to like borrow like guitars and like trombones and trumpets and all that stuff, which, let's be real, if you want to start learning music, that can be really expensive right up front. And then if you find out that you don't want to do it, because I never had to do this, but I know so many people who started playing the piano and they gave up and hated it, and their parents were like, well, we have a piano now that's just gonna sit there and do nothing. I've also seen libraries doing bike lending programs, which is so insanely cool. I wish my community that I lived in, like, because I was very nomadic for quite a few whiles with school and everything, and every time I went to a new community, I basically had to buy a bike. I was like, man, it would have been so handy to have that. But it is literally exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of like, well, big cities have that now too, where like tourists can borrow a bike or like a car and that kind of thing. You like do that, but through the library for like free or next to free. And another really cool one that I hope eventually the libraries will all have funding to do this, but I can understand why it's difficult, is iPad lending programs. It's becoming like a pretty basic thing to have now, is a tablet and iPad, even like for birth almost, but not everyone can afford them. And in all honesty, I know kids who are like destructive as heck and their parents could afford them, but they're like, I'm not spending $500 on an iPad. This kid's going to break it in 3 days. But they want to, interact with it with their kids a bit, so they can go to the library and borrow an iPad and like either leave with it for a week or sit down and do something on it. Another thing that I've noticed quite a few communities, especially in Alberta, are doing is free driver's courses, which blew my mind when I found that out. I had to pay like $600 10 years ago to get that done in Ontario. But they're doing free driving lessons through a bunch of our libraries. You get your free like study book with it, and the RCMP, like local community people, are putting it on, like they're trained like police officers and telling you this stuff. I was so mind blown when I found that out. That is so freaking awesome, and I wish more libraries did that. So many libraries do like insanely interesting information nights, and like right now cannabis legalization is happening in Canada. I've seen so many information sessions where they're like bringing bylaw officers in and a local like police force, just say like, these are the changes, this is the potential impact, this is how we're adjusting, these are the things you need to know, and we want to hear about this stuff from you guys. That's so insanely important. It doesn't matter if you're pro or against it, it's a law change that's going to affect so many people. I've seen different like communities do things on like battling racism, and or just like bringing in authors to talk about very unique things, or having people in your community that are immigrants or refugees telling their story. We've had like Holocaust survivors come in and tell their stories. You have information like career days where you're like, come in and learn about what it's like to be a nurse, and someone who's a nurse in the community tells you all about their job. There are so many information events that happen at libraries, and like, even if you're like, hey, I'd be interested in learning about this, tell your library and I'm sure they can find someone, okay? Or like, unless it's like a very weird niche thing. Or even like genealogy events where people come in and will show you how to like put together your trees, or like Green Thumb, like it's kind of getting into clubs now, but like having like organizations or events or information meeting about like doing gardening right at the beginning of gardening season, and like, there's just so many information events going on. I've seen libraries doing like Comic-Cons. They call them LiberCons sometimes, different places. My local city library just did one. And then there's like dances. I've seen, I want to say it was like in Utah or something like that. They put on a Yule Ball like every year around Christmas time, and it sells out every single year. Yeah, they do a Harry Potter Yule Ball. I've seen other ones doing sports camp. It was probably the same one. I saw some library did like a Quidditch sports camp, which I heard that and was like, I feel robbed of my childhood that I didn't get to do that. Organized sports are so expensive, especially if you have to buy equipment, and then you get in 2 seasons and the kid's like, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. And you're like, awesome, I have $3,000 worth of equipment that we just spent and you don't want to do it anymore. That's great. So many of our libraries do paint nights as well. Some of them are like paint and wine. Some of them are just like, you know, baby and mom paint. So you each paint something together. And then on top of that, you have the traditional resources like homework help and tutoring, which could be either free or an extra free. You can get e-resources depending on what your library is. There are online homework help programs that some libraries will have. And then some of the others will just say like, you know, you need volunteer hours, come to the library, you know, from 3:30 to 5:30 and sit there. And if anyone needs math help, you help them. Having how to do technology stuff. Our local library does it as well. Every like, you know, couple days they have like a come in and learn. We'll walk you through how to set up your iPad. We'll walk you through how to set up Libby. We'll walk you through all of these different things. Sometimes they're library specific e-resources and sometimes they're more broad. Lots of libraries are now buying 3D printers as well, which can be insanely expensive, and they're not just academic institutions only. I know for quite a while there were quite a few libraries that, you know, they served the architecture department at school, so they would have, you know, they would need the 3D printer for them to build 3D models for their architectural courses. But it's getting quite more common for just general public libraries to have them, and you just come in. You normally have to pay the cost of the material to make them, but other than that, it's, you know, it's way cheaper than having to buy a 3D printer. And lastly, something really cool that I want to make sure people know about is, and it was because I went to grad school in Nova Scotia, but the Halifax Public Library has a music studio. Actually, I think 3 music studios in their library. Like, you can go in and record. Like, there's recording equipment and everything. Like, it's a sound booth. Like, an actual music. Like, they're definitely not the first library to do that, but it's just, like, that is, like, literally the direction the libraries are going. That they're literally finding any way possible of all these resources that they know, especially with my age group, I'm never going to be able to afford to, like, buy a music studio. But I can go to the library and, you know, borrow a guitar and use an iPad as a composer or something like that. And then, like, go into the music studio. And I can do that all with... And sometimes you don't even need your library card, okay? If you have to pay for a library membership, a lot of those libraries are just like, look, we just need the card for you to borrow things. If you want to do anything else in the library, the programs or whatever, go. You don't need your library card. We'll just count a general stats of how many people showed up. That's all we need. So yeah, that's my kind of long-winded rant / defense of libraries. An explanation of why Amazon books cannot replace libraries. I'm sorry, but could you literally imagine like my dad being like, oh well, I want to use Ancestry Library Edition, and then, or Ancestry in general, walks to the library for free and gets to use Library Edition, versus walks to Amazon Books if he's lucky enough to have an Amazon Books, and they look at him like, yeah, sorry, that'll be like $300, thanks. I mean, my library, when you print off your receipt, when you check something out, at the bottom it will say, you know, you have saved this much money this year using the library, you have saved this much money since your library card, and it is tens of thousands of dollars in the last like 3 years since I started using this library. Boy, make sure to use your library, and if you don't use it, at least understand what's going on there and defend it. Like, and this stuff is all on top of like the regular like mommy and story time and like welcome to the community events, and like I've seen like pumpkin carving like they're community hubs. Literally everything, especially in smaller towns, happens at libraries. You are not replacing those with Amazon Books. And you sound dumb saying so. If I can find a link to the article online, I will link it in the description below. I know they eventually deleted it because of all the backlash they got, which I kind of love that they got the backlash. But yeah, so if I can find it, I'll link it below. And if not, if you click below, you will have access to all of my social media links. And if you follow me, I will follow you back.